Good afternoon, everybody. Shannon Scott from inside of springtime Bonaventure Cemetery. And things are blooming early by a month, but that's okay. We're glad for it. The winter was long and rough for a storyteller like me needing to break out of their shell. And yeah, it's been a while, but today it's interesting. I was called to do a story for you guys because it was 117 years ago this very day that the world gained a poet of greatness, a human spirit for that matter. And his name was Conrad Aiken, but he was fired into his path through a very tragic event. He witnessed the murder-suicide of his own parents. And, I think about my parents and how much I love them and how blessed I am that they're still in my life. They've been together, marriage, 55 years now, maybe 56, I don't know, but a long time, and Conrad would know that outcome. His father, Dr. Ford Aiken, was a brilliant physician who worked with deaf mutes specifically. He knew Helen Keller. I don't know if they were colleagues or not. Some say that they might have been, but he wrote poetry, he played music. He actually designed, patented, and manufactured devices for studying the ocean, the skies. And Conrad worshiped the ground his Renaissance father floated above and really earned a deep love of the cosmos, the seas, the stars through his father, Dr. Ford Aiken. And he very much loved his mother, Anna Aiken. But there we see an image of Conrad at 11 years of age. And it was when he was in his 8th year, I believe. His father was diagnosed with an illness that has unfortunately taken the lives of many men in the family, paranoid schizophrenia. And his father was given morphine to quiet the voices, and it only amplifies them, sadly. And for the next 2.5 years or so, it really does become kind of a Jekyll and Hyde story. And I think in mental illness at that time of this variety, especially inside of such a prominent individual, the town of Savannah really did know how to respond to it, except sadly, it appears that they turned their backs on the Aikens. And we won't delve into that, and I'm not really pointing any fingers. It was obviously a confusing hour. But, in the marketplace, in the streets, the usual warm embraces to the family were now kind of whispers, jeers, avoidance, cold shoulders. In church, people sitting further and further away from them in the pews kind of thing. And Conrad, but a boy, the oldest of 4 siblings, it was on him to distract his 3 youngers and entertain them when, the parents argued late at night, sometimes through the entire evening till daybreak. When his mother was too weak and embarrassed when the police had arrived to the family home, he was holding the door as they would drag his father out to the sanitarium, kicking and screaming. And really later, beyond the murder-suicide, when the police went through the diaries or the journals of the Aikens, you see that Dr. Aiken is obsessed with the idea that his wife is trying to have him committed. You see lines in the journal like, see what Anna is trying to do to me. But when you look at Anna's journal in comparison, she has nothing but expressions of love and sadness, trying to rescue her soulmate, her life mate, and of course keep the family maybe together too. But in Dr. Ford Aiken's journal, we find poetry like, death, death, the creeping form takes me to her bosom warm. So yeah, things are turning very dark, and Conrad certainly overshadowed by that. But on February 27, 1901, his parents had been fighting through the evening, and around daybreak, he hears his father cry out, 1, 2, 3, pow, a gunshot, body slumping to the floor. A moment or two later, his father repeats the count. 1, 2, 3, gunshot, body slumping to the floor. And at 11 years of age, this very face had to find the courage in himself. Climbing the steps to his parents' bedroom, he opens the door, room packed full of gun smoke, amber morning light filtering in. And as it begins to clear, he finds the tragic scene. His father slumped over his mother in a growing pool of blood. And the town did not react well to the murder-suicide. In that they tried his father for murder, a dead man. And I don't know if this was for reasons of the estate. That's not, my understanding is not clear on that, but it did occur. And as Conrad was the only witness, in a sense, or maybe the most key witness, they brought him into the courtroom to relive the tragedy of the entire event. And during the trial itself, the jury was so incensed by the presence of the boy and having to, or being forced to relive that during a break, they kidnapped him and they refused to give up his whereabouts to the judge. And eventually the judge concedes, and I believe things may have been settled or set aside in some way that didn't involve him anymore. But he was taken to his mother's parents in Boston, and his grandfather, who had known Ralph Waldo Emerson, and they'd had a writing club, Emerson at one point. They'd had a writing club in the community, and so he was like a great surrogate as far as a literary-minded fellow. He was also a Unitarian pastor, and he guides his son all the way to Harvard. And in 1915, and here we have an image of Conrad at Harvard, 1917, I think is the date on that photo. Handsome academic. But I believe he was actually moved into the dorm where his own father had lived while attending Harvard. So it was kind of a bittersweet moment. But then he is introduced to a inebriated roommate who ends up being the author of the great poem Wasteland, T.S. Eliot. And these guys would become inseparable writing acts. They were inseparable friends until Eliot's death in 1965. In fact, at one time, if you wanted to sound cool on campus, you never said Eliot and Aiken's names apart. But because Eliot was like the wild man, always on top of a bar expounding his greatness and, doing things like, giving up his U.S. passport and becoming an English citizen, and the Queen of England called Eliot her favorite poet, we really see Eliot becoming the name, and then we have Conrad Aiken, who never read his poetry publicly once ever, dialing back from the limelight. We only talk about Eliot today, even if in many ways Conrad Aiken was the original rock star. In fact, I consider him kind of the architect of the beatniks, in many ways the father of the hippie movement, all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, Conrad Aiken, in spite of the shyness, achieved many an accolade. He wrote 50 novels. He took the Pulitzer Prize for poetry in 1930. He ultimately became the U.S. Poet Laureate, the in-resident poet of the Library of Congress. And he and Sigmund Freud were such good friends that if you went to Vienna, Paris, or Berlin to get analyzed by Freud, Aiken's novels were the reading materials in Freud's lobbies. And one of the last projects Freud had slated for himself professionally, and his lab, if you will, before he succumbed to mouth cancer, was a study of Conrad Aiken's brain. Freud believed that Aiken might be warding off the illness by writing every day of his life. And one of the things that Aiken expressed actually in an interview, that he was so terrified of the illness that he believed if he stopped writing for one day, he would be robbed of his capacity. So maybe the writing thing for him was the trick. And as far as I know, he never exhibited true signs, although he had a very maddening life, no doubt about it. But when he and his wife, Mary Hoover Augusta, one of the great female painters of the 20th century, his third wife, came back to Savannah in retirement, talk about an artist's life full circle. He and his wife purchased the house bordering his childhood home. And I'm going to talk about that later today, directly in front of the home downtown Savannah, and talk about some of the other events that transpired there that are indeed special. So in a way, this is almost like part two of the video I'm doing now. We'll do more of a part one when we get downtown. But I wanted to share this bench too, because Conrad Aiken and his wife Mary, they used to sit here together in patio chairs 6 days a week, some people say. That's 12 times a week. And they had cocktail hour here twice a day. In fact, Conrad Aiken, according to his best friend, who's still living, I believe, used to like to eat Spam while he would sip a martini. So yeah, Spam-tini, right? But as they sat here in the 1960s, enjoying the beauty of Bonaventure and, of course, the nearby river and the boats going by, and just really the serenity of maybe being here between the earthly and the eternal, where he could meet his parents once again, they said aloud, wouldn't it be great if one day our grave is a bench, other people can sit here and do as ourselves? So that was stipulated in their will, that this would become a granite bench. And until 1980, it was a pretty legal pastime for people to be in Bonaventure having a cocktail, as the old tradition went, among the Greeks and other, let's say, cultures. But apparently one party too big got it all outlawed. And, fans of the novel Midnight in the Garden of Evil, they either don't know it's illegal or whatever the case is. But sometimes in the middle of my daily tour, we find them sitting here with champagne buckets and coolers and whatnot. Although at one time there were 3 women here with light beer in their hand, and I had to object completely to their light beer moment. But many moons ago, one fan took maybe the tradition entirely too far when they epoxied an entire barware set to the back of this bench. The city was none too happy about the new permanent serving station, but I think Conrad Aiken and Mary may be smiling from somewhere. But all the same, I do want to show or share the pride of one of the prides of my collection at home. And this is a framed poem that Conrad typed up at Harvard in 1917, which was an homage to his own mother, called Music I Heard. And this is actually signed by Conrad Aiken. And if you'll bear with me, I'll recite it aloud. Music I heard with you was more than music, and bread I broke with you was more than bread. Now that I am without you, all is desolate, all that was once so beautiful, us dead. Your hands once touched this table and this silver, and I've seen your fingers hold this glass. These things do not remember you, beloved, and yet your touch upon them will not pass. For it was in my heart you moved among them, and blessed them with your hands and with your eyes, and in my heart they will remember always. They knew you once, O beautiful and wise. Signed, Conrad Aiken. And yes, there's Anna, his mother, but what a beautiful tribute to her. And I thought I would share that with you all today on this special day of remembrance of the loss of Dr. Ford Aiken, his wife, and of Potter Aiken. But yes, the world gained a spiritual mover and shaker, Conrad Aiken. So check me out later when I'm downtown Savannah in front of the Conrad Aiken House and Colonial Park Cemetery. And I'll share with you really what is, in a way, kind of part 1, but very much in the fashion of Conrad Aiken. I'm doing things a little erratically and perhaps upside down, but maybe there's method to that madness. But thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. And really just appreciate you dialing into this spiritual storyteller. So